We continue now at the top of Daf Yomi Gemara and Meseches Menachos. This is Menachos Daf 5a. On the previous summit, the Gemara was discussing a statement of Rav. Rav said that by Asham Nazir and Asham Mitzorah, since those karbanos are in order to render the individual fit, if those karbanos are brought Shalol Lishma and they do not render the individual fit, so then those karbanos are completely disqualified, even though normally we say that by a karban Asham, if it is brought Shalol Lishma, it is still kosher. But again, in this case where it is a machshir, where these are karbanos that are machshir and they render the individual fit, so if they're not machshir, then they are pasul, they are disqualified as well. And the Gemara asked on the previous summit, well, what's the difference from other asham, other karban ashams, where we say that they are mechaper, and if they're done shalol lishma, they are not going to be mechaper, so why don't we say that since they are not mechaper, since they're not an atonement, therefore they are pasul, they're disqualified as well? And the Gemara in the previous summit brought an answer from Rabbi Yirmiyah. Rabbi Yirmiyah said there's a difference between mechaper and machshir. And mechaper, we find that they can be brought even la'achar misa. Machshir, we don't find that, and therefore, in general, we see that by machshir we are more strict, and that's why, again, by Asham Nazir and Asham Mitzorah, which are machshirin, so therefore, again, if they're not able to be machshir, then we say they are pasul, they are disqualified. And the Gemara in the previous summit asked that we do find, for example, the Ola and Shlomim are machshirin by Nazir, and we find that those are brought la'achar misa. So what does it mean that Rabbi Yirmiyah says that we don't find machshirin that are brought la'achar misa? And the Gemara in the previous summit answered that it's different over there by Nazir because that is a situation of machshirin, but it's machshirin she'eno kavua. It's not a firm, established machshir, as the Gemara now continues and explains. Diyamar mar, because the master said, alechad mishlosh on yotze, it can even be on one of the three, meaning you don't need all of them for the machshir. Any one of the three karbonos can be machshir, therefore it's not kavua, and that's not going to go against what Rabbi Yirmiyah said. And the statement over here of Gilach Alechad Mishlosh Don Yotz is referring to the Nazir shaving on any one of the karbanos, referring to the Ola, the Chatos, or the Shlamim, any one of those Yotza, he has fulfilled his obligation, and so therefore, again, it's considered a Machshir She'eno Kavua. And Rashi explains, kavua, again, when it's a machshir kavua, de'ein sham shum davar acher machshir habaylam elahu. That means that this is the only thing that is a machshir. That's kavua. Again, in this case, it is not kavua. And Rashi continues, al achas mishlosh, if he shaves on any one of the three. Afilo al chatos, even on the chatos, t'chsiv v'achar yishta ha-nazir yayin. It says after the nazir will drink wine. V'amrinan ben nazir, we say in nazir, achar maisi yachidi, after just one action. V'yolef hasam shaper b'perak gimel minin. It's all learned over there in perak gimel minin. In Meseches Nazir. And the Gemara continues, Meisvei, we have a question from the following Braisa, Asham Mitzorah Shenishchat Shalol Lishmo, the Asham of a Mitzorah that was slaughtered Shalol Lishmo, not for its sake, O Shalonitan Midama Agave Bahonos, or the blood, it wasn't applied from its blood on the thumb or the big toe of the Mitzorah, Hareza Ola Lagave Mizbeach, still it ascends onto the Mizbeach, it does go up on the Mizbeach, Viton, Nesachim, and libations are required, Vitzarich Asham Acher Lachshiro, but you need another Asham in order to render the Mitzorah fit. And Rashi explains, V'ton nesachim kidin Asham Mitzorah. It requires nesachim, just like the law by Asham Mitzorah, but Perak Beis Midos and Perak Beis Midos. Lahachshiro, again, there needs to be another Asham to render him fit, L'Mitzorah B'Hakol. We're talking about rendering the Mitzorah fit to come within the community, within the congregation. And the Gemara says, Tiyufta de Rav, that this Bryce is a refutation of Rav. And Rashi explains, Tiyufta de Rav, Damar La'el de Posel. Again, Rav said before that such an Asham would be disqualified. Ho'elu ba lahachshav v'lo hichsher, since it's supposed to render him fit, and it doesn't render him fit. But in this case, we see that it does not render the Mitzorah fit. There needs to be another Asham to render him fit, but still it is not disqualified. It is still able to ascend on the Mizbeach. And the Gemara continues, Rav Shimon ben Lakish Amar, and Rav Shimon ben Lakish says, Minchas ha'omer shekamsa shalol lishma, the Minchas ha'omer, if the Kmitza is taken shalol lishma, the festival is taken shalol lishma, so ksheira, it is kosher, v'shireh ein necholin, but the remainder is not eaten at shatavi Minchas ha'omer acheres, until another Minchas ha'omer is brought, v'tatirena, in order to permit it. And Rashi explains, V'shireh ein necholin, the remainder is not eaten, misham Isser Chodesh, because you still have an Isser Chodesh over here. And the Gemara continues, Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish Amar, and Reish Lakish says, Minchas ha'omer shekamsa shalol lishma, the Minchas ha'omer, if the Kmitza, if the fistful is taken shalol lishma, not for its sake, keshera, it is kosher. This goes against Rav. On the previous daf, again, Rav said that since the Minchas ha'omer is a matter, it permits the chadash, it permits the new grain, so if it's taken shalol lishma, if the Kmitza is taken shalol lishma, it is disqualified. Since it's not able to be matter, it's disqualified as well. But Reish Lakish is saying, no, kamsa shalol lishma is kosher, v'shir v'shireha eina necholin, but the remainder of that minchas ha'omer is not eaten, at shetavi minchas ha'omer acheres v'tatirena, until another korban mincha is brought in order to permit it. And Rashi explains, v'shireha eina necholin, the remainder is not eaten, misham iser chadash, because there is an iser chadash over here, new grain is prohibited, and so therefore you bring another minchas ha'omer in order to be matir, and then you'll be able to eat the remainder. But the Gemara asks, mikrav hechi karva, but how are you able to offer it, meaning this original kometz, this original minchas ha'omer shekamsa shalol lishma, how can it be offered on the mizbeach? Mimashke Yisrael, we learn from the pasuk Mimashke Yisrael, min hamuter li Yisrael, you can only have offerings from that which is mutter, and this is not yet mutter. Again, it's a situation of an Isser Chadash. And the Gemara continues and answers, Amar Rav Ada bar Ava, Rav Ada bar Ava says, Kasavar Reish Lakish holds, Ein mechusar zman lebo bayom. It's not called mechusar zman, it's not called missing in terms of time, if that day it is going to be permitted. And Rashi explains, Mimashke Yisrael Pasaku b'Yechezkel. This is a pasuk in Yechezkel b'Karbonos. It's dealing with Karbonos. Min hamutter lemashke Yisrael. You have nesachim. When you're bringing nesachim, it has to be from that which is mutter for Klal Yisrael to drink. V'lo min ha'asr, not from that which is forbidden. And the answer of the Gemara was, Ein mechusar zman lebo bayom. It's not called mechusar zman if it's that day. Hoel v'hayom tehem muteres li Yisrael. Since today it will be mutter. Achar shetikrav minchas omer acheres. When the other minchas omer is brought, V'lo mechuseres man hi legavoa. That's not called mechuseres man as far as gavoa, as far as the Almighty. And the Gemara continues, Mesev Rav Ada Breder of Yitzchak. Rav Ada Breder of Yitzchak asks a question from the following brisa. This is a question on Rav Ada bar Ava. Rav Ada bar Ava said that Ein mechusar zman lebo bayom. The brisa says, Yesh ba'ofos she'ein b'menachos. We find halachos by ofos, by bird offerings, that we don't find by menachos, by flower offerings. And Yesh b'menachos she'ein ba'ofos. We find halachos by menachos that we don't find by ofos. And the brisa explains, Yesh ba'ofos. We find by ofos, sha'ofos boin b'nidvas shnayim. When it comes to bird offerings, two people are able to donate one bird offering. Umechusrei kapara, and with regards to mechusrei kapara, those are individuals who still need an atonement, like a zav, a zava, yoledis, mitzora. When it comes to mechusrei kapara, we have bird offerings, we don't have korban mincha. V'hutshru mechlal isurim b'kodesh. We also find by ofos that hutshru mechlal isurim b'kodesh. What that means is, you can have something that is asur in general if it wasn't kodesh. Let's say malika, if malika was done with a bird instead of shchita, so that does not make the bird kosher. But malika is kosher when the bird is a carbon. That's what it means. Hutru mechlal yisurim b'kodesh. Masha ein kein b'menachos, and everything we just listed is not true by carbon mincha. V'yesh b'menachos, we also find halachos by menachos that are not by ofos. Shah menachos tu'unos kli, menachos require a vessel, u'tunuf and waving, v'hagosha, you have to bring them close to the mizbeach before taking the kometz. V'yeshnan b'tzibur k'v'yachad, you also have carbon mincha that is communal, just like individual. Masha ein kein b'ofos, and all of this is not true by ofos. And the Gemara now asks its question, V'im isa, if it is true that ein mechusar zman lebo bayom, so then b'menachos nami mashkachas law, by menachos also we find the hutshru mechlolon isurim b'kodesh. We could find something that normally is usur that's going to be mutter when it comes to kodesh. Umayniu, and what would be the example of that? Minchas ha'omer. That's the example that we just gave. Minchas ha'omer. You have a situation where the kometz is taken shalol lishma, and we say that it is permitted to offer that kometz on the mizbeach even at a time when chodesh is not allowed. Again, because ein mechusar zman lebo bayom, since chodesh will be allowed later in that day, that is good enough. So that would be hutshru mechlal yisurim b'kodesh. And the Gemara answers to this, Kevan de ein mechusar zman lebo bayom, since we say ein mechusar zman lebo bayom, so lavi suru, it's not actually considered an isur, it's not actually considered to be a prohibition, and so for that reason, that's why it is able to be burned on the mizbeach. And Rashi explains, Ofos boin benidvas shnayim, again, bird offerings can be donated by two. Beperak hamenachos v'anisachim, later in Perak hamenachos v'anisachim, Rebbe Yomer l'chol nidreim v'nidvosim asher yakrivu hakol boin b'shutfis. All karbonos can come in partnership, chutz min hamincha, with the exception of the carbon mincha. B'mnei shenemar bo nefesh, there it says nefesh, it's just one individual. U'mechusrei kapara, and then the Brisa said, mechusrei kapara, kulon mevian ofos, lahachshir and bekachim. They all bring bird offerings in order to render them fit for kachim, and that refers to zav, v'zava, v'yoledis u'mitzora. That refers to a zava, yoledis, and mitzora. Those are the mechusrei kapara. V'hutru l'kodesh mechlal isurin. And again, when it comes to ofos, they are hutru mechlal isurin b'kodesh lehedyot de malika asura b'chulin u'ksher b'kachim. The point is that malika is something which would be forbidden if it was chulin, but it is kosher by kachim. And then the Brisa said, menachos tu'unos kli b'perek shtei halechem. We find in perek shtei halechem later that menachos require a vessel. Ofos eina tu'un and kli. Birds do not require require a vessel. Shahalei milikasan betziporin, because the malika is done with the fingernail. V'hagasha, and then menachos are brought close to the mizbeach. B'perakola menachos bos matzah. Hagasha magisha b'karen ma'aravis dromis shal mizbeach keneged chuda shal karen. You bring it to the southwest corner of the mizbeach. And minchas ha'omer yeshna betzibur. We find that there's a communal mincha, like the minchas ha'omer. Ofos ein boin betzibur. We don't find ofos as communal. But Toras Kohanim gabi nidvasos karbono hayachin mevi of lo hatzibur. We say in Toras Kohanim, an individual brings an oath and not the tzibur. And again, the question of the Gemara was v'misa, if it's true that dayin chodesh aser, that in a situation where chodesh is still aser, minchas omer nami ishtakach the karva legavoa masha aser lehedyot. Again, in a situation you're going to bring the minchas omer even when chodesh is aser, so you have something mutter legavoa that's aser for the hedyot. And the Gemara answered lavi surah, who again, since bo bayom there's no mechusar zman, that's not called an iser. The command to karva minchas omer acheres dami. It's as if the other minchas omer was already brought. And the Gemara continues, Mesav Rav Sheshas. Rav Sheshas asks a question from the following brisa. This is another question on the concept of Ein Mechusar Zman Lebo Bayom. The brisa says, Hiktim Matan Shemen LaMatan Dam. If he first did the Matan Shemen before the Matan Dam, really the blood is supposed to go on the thumb and the big toe of the Mitzorah before the oil goes. Let's say the oil went first. So then Yimalenu Shemen V'yachzor V'yit and Shemen Achar Matan Dam. He should refill the oil and again do the application of the oil so that it's after the application of the blood. And the brisa continues, Matan Bahonos Lamatan Sheva. Let's say he did the Matan Bahonos. Again, that's the application on the thumb and the big toe. And he did that before the Matan Sheva, which is the 7 applications. So Yimalenu Shemen V'yachzor V'yit and Matan Bahonos Achar Matan Zayin. So then again, he should fill the oil and do the Matan Bahonos after the Matan Zayin. And so the Gemara asks, V'yamr ein mechusar zman levo bayom. Now, if you say that there's no such thing as mechusar zman levo bayom, because it's going to be taken care of later in the day, so that's fine. So amai yachzor v'yit, and why do you have to do the applications again? My diyavad ovid, whatever was done should be considered to be done. It could be done out of order because of the idea of ein mechusar zman levo bayom. And the Gemara continues and answers, Amar Rav Papa says, Shani hilchus mitzorah. It's different by the laws, the rituals of mitzorah. Dechsiva buhu avoya. There it says havoya. It has to be as is. The pasuk is saying it must be in order. The Amar Hakasav, because the pasuk says Zos tia Torah hamitzorah tia b'havayasa tehei. We learn from the word tia that it needs to be done in that fashion. Again, it needs to be done as is in that order. And Rashi explains Matan Shemen, the applications of the oil to Mitzorah. That's talking about the application of the oil of the Mitzorah. Matan Dam Tzarech Lahaktim. Really, the application of blood needs to be first. Kemosha Amar Be'inyan Al Makam Dam Ha'asham Yitin Hashem. It says that on the place of the Dam Ha'asham, that's where the oil is going to be applied. So Yimalenu L'log, you fill the log of oil. L'Matan Sheva, and then there's the Matan Sheva. That's where it says V'hiza Min Hashemen Be'etzbo Sheva Pam. It says in the pasuk, he sprinkles from the oil with his finger 7 times. That's the Matan Sheva. And the Gemara continues, Mesav Rav Papa. Rav Papa asks a question from the following brisa. This is also a question on the concept of Ein Mechusar Zman Lebo Bayom, and this brisa is also discussing the purification of the Mitzorah. The brisa says, Hiktim Chatoso Le'ashamo. If the Chatos was brought before the Asham, this is talking about the Chatos of the Mitzorah being brought before the Asham, being done out of order. The Asham is supposed to go first. So Lo Yia Achar Memaris Bedama. Somebody else shouldn't stand and stir the blood to prevent it from congealing, and then you will bring the Asham, and then you'll do it in the proper order. That's not the proper solution. Ela tu ubar tzuras, or rather you have to let it decay, which means you leave it until the next day. V'teitze lebeis hasreif, and it goes out to the area where it is supposed to be burned. And so again, essentially the question is the same. Why is the out of order a problem over here if we say ein mechusar zman lebo bayom? And that's what the Gemara immediately asks. Amai kam mosiv Rav Papa. What is this question of Rav Papa? For Rav Papa hu damar, but Rav Papa is the one that just said shani hilchas mitzorah dechsiva b'hu havoya, that hilchas mitzorah is different. It says Havaya, and so we understand from the pasuk it has to be in that order. And so the Gemara continues and says, Ela Rav Papa hachi kakashale. Rather, Rav Papa, this is his difficulty. Eimahani mili avoda. We should say that that's talking about avoda. In other words, the precise order needs to be followed by that which is in the category of avoda, of service in the Beis Hamikdash. But shchita lav avoda. But shchita, that's not considered an avoda. So the pasuk shouldn't apply to that. And so that's the question. V'ein mechusar zman lebo bayom. If we say that's true, true of ein mechusar zman lebo bayom, yayacher memaris bedama. So again, just have somebody stir the blood, v'likrev asham, and then bring the asham, v'hadr likarev chatas, and then bring the chatas, and that should be fine if we hold ein mechusar zman lebo bayom. And so the Gemara gives an alternative answer when it comes to the omer. It's not because ein mechusar zman lebo bayom. The reason why that omer, which was shalol lishma, the reason why the komets can be offered, el omer a papa, rather a papa says, hainu taima de Reish Lakish. This is really the reason of Reish Lakish. Because Savar, he holds, heyer mizrach matter, that once the sun rises on the 16th, that is what's matter, the new grain. The omer doesn't actually have to be brought. To Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, darmi tarvayu. Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, they both say, afila bizman shebeis hamikdash kayim. This is true even when the Beis Hamikdash was around. It's the heyer mizrach that is matir. And Rashi explains, lo ye'acher memaris bedam. It shouldn't be somebody else who's stirring the blood. Shelo yikrosh kesheyazim idam asham. That way it won't congeal when they're sprinkling from the blood of the asham. Rather, to ubar to rasa, it said in the brisa that it should be left to decay. Tani chenad lamocher, you leave it till the next day. V'tifsel belina, becomes disqualified by being left overnight. To uber mara, and then the appearance of it decays. Lechluchis basar heimena, the moisture of the meat is then taken away from it. Mishum bizayon kachim. That's because of a disgrace of kachim. Dechol's man shelo nifselu belina. If it wasn't yet possible, disqualified through being left overnight, ein nisrafin, you're not going to be able to burn it. Elam came psula begufa, unless it has a disqualification in itself. Alma, we see midiktani tzeitze lebeis hasreifa, from the fact that we say it should be burned. Apparently, yesh mechusar zman levo bayom. There's a concept of mechusar zman even that day. And Rashi continues, Hani mila dechsiva havoya ba'avoda. When the pasuk says havoya, that's by avoda, that which is considered service. Avol shchita lav avodi, but shchita is not avoda, dog sheira bizarre, because that's kosher even by a non-kohen. And so then the Gemara then said, at the time of the Reish Lakish, damar komsa niktar, the real reason of Reish Lakish that he says the kometz is burned to kasavar because he holds, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Hey Amid Beis.